Good morning, everybody. John Stokely here for GAI Insights, getting you the Gen AI news briefing, rating your news essential, important, or optional, putting thoughts in your head and time in your day. We're delighted to have Vivek Muthiahar today from Pfizer, is a part of the Gen AI community, the GAI community, and of course, Luda and Ankaj. All right, we've got some interesting articles today, everything from new IT infrastructure, a suggestion of how the U.S. can continue to lead. We're already built about 70% of the world's models, all the way through a fantastic new set of quantized models, very small ones, very powerful, coming out of Meta. So lots to cover today. All right, Akash, if you could start us off with the first article, please.
Good, thanks, John. So the first one that we have for today comes from Meta, and it talks about how Meta is introducing quantized Llama models, which have increased speed and a reduced memory footprint.
All right, amazing. We see a lot of action here in the small models. What do you think, Luda?
Yeah, I actually think that I put it as important. So the story here is that, as you remember, Meta introduced smaller models, 1 billion and 3 billion, Llama 3.2, and then noticed that a lot of people started quantizing them, meaning making the weights smaller in size, so reducing the after decimal point number of digits, right, to sometimes just the integer, right? So in a sense, they were getting ahead of Meta. So Meta took notice and did a very specific lightweight quantized training for these models, and now they're releasing it. The goodness here is that they can sit on the edge on the small devices, and they can have good inference speed with almost no latency. And the claim here is that they didn't lose accuracy. So this article is talking about how they did it, what was the quantization training, and how they used the LoRa methodology and the like. So this is a significant advance, I think, for the age, and that's why I put it as important, even though it's just a product announcement, really.
Yeah, but I mean, a pretty robust product announcement, right? A lot of detail here about how they did this model, the methodologies they're using. Notably, 1 in 3 billion easily sit on the new cell phones. So
Yep.
it's that's certainly will sit in any of the, if you go across different hardware that's getting put out there. And remember, there's something like 6.8 to 7 billion smartphones in the world, and I think I haven't been able to get a good number, but I think the refresh cycle is about 10 to 15% a year, which means that by the end of next year we ought to have 500 million of these phones out there. Vivek, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think what we saw, I think Paul and I were at this Liquid AI conference where I think there's a shift towards smaller and smaller models because it allows you to have more personalization as well as privacy, because you can have these on the edge and you can put your own data within it and explore that. So I agree, this is where the field is going towards, and you will see the next article in terms of the energy as well is going to be an important piece of how we utilize these models, as you will see in the few articles from now. But this another potential way to reduce the energy demands while keeping the quality in place. So I agree with important.
So what do you think, Paul? Is this a Barney? You breaking out the purple man?
No, Barney. I think it's important. I mean, back in our conference 2 or 3 weeks ago, one of the chief architects I know from a software company, downloaded Llama right in the conference and started working on his laptop. So I think take the device you have and start playing with models, if it's on the phone or your laptop, is really important. And so important.
All right, important it is. Ankaj, next.
Well, and last thing, I think the other reason, John, important for that is that the shadow IT issues for corporate America continues to be a big issue here. So now I've got 40,000 employees and I got 500 of them running around with models on their company phone. Goodness.
Well, it's interesting. IT may call it shadow IT. Somebody else might call it end user computing and empowerment of the knowledge worker. But yes, yeah. I mean, you and I have had that conversation that, bring your own model, at least right now, is way more complicated than bring your own device.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we agree, Ashish. Great to have Vivek in the house. All right. So next.
Okay, the next one comes from Morgan Stanley, and they are now using their OpenAI powered chatbot in their Wall Street division as well.
Yes, one of the firms of JP Morgan, and a reclusive but genius dude that he was. They're using it across the organization here. Lots of 70,000 reports, they're saying. What do you think here, Vivek?
Yeah, initially this would be an essential because I thought it would be, but I gave it an optional. Again, it's initially I thought that, hey, now you are using these models to generate more alpha for me and for the customers, but that is not the use case they're discussing here. This is specifically an internal chatbot that goes through a lot of their research and has that research pretty handy for their client partners. So that is kind of the key use case they discussed here. They do talk about what I do like that they're going all in. They're providing this to all of their 80,000 customers, half of which are starting to use this AI technology in their daily practice. And they do see some time savings, but what I don't like about this is they don't provide any metrics around how does this translate to the impact. Does it lead to better customer satisfaction, time saved on the employee's perspective? And they don't provide any additional numbers. So this is just a use case that I think all AI leaders should already have incorporated that into their kind of practice. That's why I give it an option.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, the only data in there is that they use this 3 times as much as their previous AI tool, but we don't know what the baseline was for that previous AI tool. So you're on optional. What do you think, Paul, Luda?
I also rated it optional, even though it's a huge bank and they continue to innovate. The capabilities that they're putting in the hands of traders and essentially everyone in the bank are quite significant. So we will see huge impact actually on in general stocks and the knowledge out there of the stocks performance and the like predictions and the like. So I think it will have a great impact, but at the moment, as a use case, it's probably optional.
Okay, use case optional. Paul, where are you on this?
Yeah, I think John Spielke and I had a presentation this week at a top 15 bank that both the entire board and their management team, and they really are paying attention to this startup called Evident AI, which is rating all the banks. Yes. And everyone agrees Morgan Stanley's way out there, but here's Morgan or others catching up here. Yeah, I think it's optional, John, but boy, it really reinforces that there's industries in the crucible. Consulting, we've seen that with McKinsey here, banking here. On the legal side, I talked with an AI startup on the legal field this week that's just going gangbusters, that we really are moving from idea pilot to disruption.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
Just a clarification, Paul. I think you mean JP Morgan Chase.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
And then Morgan Stanley trying to catch up here. Go ahead, Vivek.
JP Morgan Chase with the woman is great leadership over there. Just everyone's recognizing head of the pack in that sector.
Yeah, I think one thing that was very interesting is how OpenAI is ingrained, and they focused on banks. This article does highlight that and the important role they will play, and they are continuing to be a big force, especially in the banking sector. So that's something to keep an eye on.
So Kevin, John, you might want to comment on this, but Kevin notices that it's a regulatory governance and compliance would be very important. It seems like they're actually doing quite well in that sense.
Yes.
Releasing it. So this is good.
Yes. When I was at PwC, some of our largest jobs, because PwC is very deep in financial services. They audit more of the big banks than anybody. And they serve the financial services. just one of the money center banks, for example, their yearly Know Your Customer compliance bill with PwC for the U.S. only was $150 million a year. So, I mean, there's this issue of regulatory compliance is massive. I agree, Kevin. I actually think that the combination of traditional AI and generative AI could massively take that number down. And I do think I was actually going to rate this as important because, for these reasons, I agree with the criticisms of the case study, but, having a Morgan Stanley step up and do this, given the kind of herd mentality of most banks, not all, I thought was important. But I'm feeling
John, one case for important is that we've been getting a lot of feedback and requests for more case studies.
Yes.
And less news. So that would be one reason to till it that way. And Vivek, I know this is our first guest rater, so excited to have you on here. But usually John, as a former professor, has the chalk. So we had a full discussion here, but Lou and I just agree with whatever the.
Yes, I've been a long-time listener of the show and a huge fan, and it's just perfect to be hazed with the chocolate in the morning. So I'm okay with the important.
You can say whatever you want, but I will put what goes up on the board.
We need to get you some chalk, John, some actual chalk.
Yeah, I guess.
All right, we're gonna give this one optional. Next.
Okay. Whoa, that's cool.
Well,
okay.
The next one comes from Cohere, and they have launched their AI Expanse model, which has both 8 billion and 32 billion open weight model available.
Yes, and the emphasis here very much on multilingual, and according to their benchmarks, the creation of capability across different languages. If you go down a little bit more, down, here we go, English. So this is the 8 billion language model, win, loss, and tie, in terms of, their benchmarks. I'm not exactly sure how their benchmarks work, but you can see, especially in massive languages like Arabic and Hindi, Chinese, so I don't know what percentage of the world speaks Arabic, Chinese, and Hindi together, but it's probably 40%, 50%. I mean, it's got to be, or maybe more, more than half. So I think very important. I also thought was interesting is if you scooch down, and I was going to rate this important. If you scooch down, Ankaj talks about the different ways that it does things like model merge and how they, the way that they, this one in particular. Yeah. So, multilingual arbitrage, merging, iterative DPO with merging, is really interesting. I thought technically how they managed to use synthetic data without getting, model collapse in terms of the way that they did it. So I thought there were some techniques here that might, have horizontal or, kind of lateral use in other models. And the beauty here too is back to where we were with, the first article. These things can live on phones. Most phones can certainly take most of the neural enabled phones can take an 8 billion parameter model. And many of them can get up to 30. So they could actually use these models on the phones. And I think that's huge, given the fact that, the vast majority of internet access is, through phones. So anyway, I thought this is important. Others?
I rated it optional, but could support important for the specific reason because there are many companies that work across the globe with their apps, and the multilingual small model capability is actually very important. So from that perspective, I can support important.
All right, so we get two importance here. She's just commenting back on our friends at Morgan Stanley. Yeah, Michael, agree. Interesting. They have the social groups here too, 220 language ambassadors. What do you think, Vivek, Paul? Where are you guys on this?
Yeah, I'll start. I also can support important because I work in communication, medical communication, and we repurpose a lot of medical content that's developed into a variety of different languages often, right, for clinicians. So having a model that is much more accurate in developing that and that can be used through production, I think would be very important. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm trying to remember what's the Eastern European nation that's gone heavy on crypto and electronic contracts. It's not Latvia, Estonia, I think. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see some regulatory innovation by other countries, using these things to say, hey, look, if you have to attach this model, and especially Vivek in your world, I mean, you can imagine launching any kind of drug with a model, right? That's a tutor, explains it. Maybe it's got some compliance stuff that it shoots back to the cloud. Hey, John's actually interacted with the model in these 16 ways and seen these 17 warnings and things like that. I mean, why not, right? I mean, because you do all this hard work to inform the channel about risks and so forth. Why not have a tutor attached to every pill, kind of thing? You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah. What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, no, I agree with Vivek. Important. I mean, I think one of the things that Vivek, we were talking with one of our AI leaders we do a lot of work with is a medical device, and 140 languages they have to be concurrent on through compliance and everything else, and it is a non-trivial cost. And the AI leader, who's got a 50-person team we talk with, he didn't realize how much it cost till he started asking around the organization, and they have a huge group up in Canada, and this is some real benefit. So I think it is a lower cost benefit and some real applicability, particularly for the highly regulated folks.
Yeah, Ashish, this I agree, Ashish, that this it doesn't have to be some incredible new breakthrough thing. The other thing that I think I learned when I was at PwC, and I'm I'm not an accountant, but I could now play one on TV. When you think about the relationship between the regulators and these complex regulations, I'd be curious if you agree with this, Vivek, because you actually live it every day. The regulators are open over time to new models of what compliance means, right? So is it sampling? Is it confirmation that everyone's been educated, right? Is it measurement of harm, right? Different ways that you take the intent of regulation and turn it into a process which then the regulators hold the firms accountable for. And I really believe, because we can deal with unstructured data and we can actually track interactions with that unstructured data in a longitudinal way now with these models, I think it's going to lead to new kinds of processes to implement policies. And I think it's going to have a massive effect on things like pharma and things like banking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there is a upcoming FDA advisory panel where they're soliciting advice, and I think mid-November, on just use of AI within medical devices. And to your point, John, that they are going to have some of these discussions on how to regulate these devices, because I think the opportunity is here. And especially some of these models allow you for explainability, and then you can track all the decisions it's making. So those will be important.
Yeah, John, one other last thing. I know you've been very articulate on the PRISM model for project selection with these companies overwhelmed, and really advocating for projects that show an ROI payback within the fiscal year on metrics that the company can understand. And this is like contracts to me. The CFO can understand it. It's hard to disagree. You don't have risk on outside employee risks. So
right. Yeah, it's a thing they don't like spending money on. They have to spend money on it, and they have to be able to show to the regulators that they've spent the money on it, or at least have the efficacy of it. Interesting. Michael notes that there's approximately 7,000 languages in the world. One of the things about, we haven't gone into it all, in talking about this, is I actually think that large language models will enable more variety in languages to sustain, because of the kind of universal translation nature of them. Because it's just easy. It would be easier to hold on to your native language and be part of global commerce with a large language model than before. In addition, it'll be easier for people to teach themselves about those languages. So I'm optimistic that if you think of languages as kind of an ecosystem, and the variety of that ecosystem has been coming down and down and down and down with colonialism and industrialization. I think it's actually going to go the other way now, which is kind of cool.
Well, I know we're beating this up, but it's also, John, the explosion of market opportunity when you have one offering in one language to other offerings. So we're seeing that in Hollywood, to take movies dubbed in English and dub them into natural things. Here, you can see the same thing with John Deere, who's only got their products in 7 languages, having other people understand their products much easier.
Yes, and I agree with Michael's voice of choice. I mean, not to go into it here, but I mean, if you think of culture as an interplay between social cognition, social reality, and an epistemology that kind of sits together, this I think will decrease the minimum efficient scale of having a culture, and then the interoperability of cultures will go up. So that should increase variety, which I think is all good for humanity. Anyway, next.
Okay. Important, right? Got
Important.
it. Okay.
Good discussion. We can't remember what we rated it.
I remember. Important all the way. All right, baby. Yeah.
Yeah. So the
that's
next
great.
one comes.
Next one.
Yeah. India, yes, the mother of all cultures, right? And the mother, well, whatever. I think India is the mother of all religions and, greatness. But anyway, like that. Okay, next.
So the next one comes from Google DeepMind, and it talks about their SynthID offering, so through which you can identify AI-generated content.
All right, let me put this up here. Yeah, very cool little video here showing, how they do this watermarking. Let's see, who do we have on this? Was this you, Luda?
Me. It's Luda. Right. So I rate it as important because it's Google. So this is a capability that embeds markings in images, video, and text across the board that can be recognizable by a model. So we know that there are many. It's a very competitive space. It's great that people are going at that, but Google kind of put it all together. In some sense, it's a catch up, but it's a powerful catch up. And since it's Google, I said important.
All right, so catch up here, watermarking, critical aspect. What do you think, Paul, Vivek?
Yeah, I agree. I think the only concern that I have is, will others adopt it? Right.
Yeah.
So what happens when the language or video goes to another platform? And it's great for content developers that they can track their content through that.
Yes.
But if OpenAI, I'm thinking about OpenAI, they would develop their own system potentially as well. So for watermarking. So it's an important subject. Yeah, and Ashish agrees that we need to have more trust in the content that's generated by generative AI, and this is one of the ways to do that. So
yeah, fascinating. I mean, if you look at the history of commerce, usually it's crime that leads the way to legit commerce. So so a lot of the control systems that we have for existing commerce came from basically trying to chase down bad guys. I mean, you look at the SEC and reporting and all that other stuff that came after the craziness in the markets, right? And so I think it's a natural evolution of things, right?
Yeah.
The Paul, where are you? You okay with important on this one?
Yeah, I'll support important. It's obviously an important topic here. I mean, we're really, really early days in this, but we've got to figure out if we don't trust this content or not. It's just, I've been trying to use TikTok more just because it's so popular. And, I must have I play basketball, so I follow the Celtics, but I have probably 50 different feed items about Caitlin Clark going to Europe, and it's all fake news. And it's really,
yeah, I was listening to a channel, and one particular podcast was really interesting. And then it says in the comments, "This is fake. Do not listen to it.
Yeah.
This is AI generated." It's right. We need to figure out how we trust the content. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, historically, since whatchamacallit, for a long time, I think since you might go all the way to Alexander Graham Bell, but the telcos really haven't innovated on, content in a way that they could have been much bigger in search and all that other stuff. And this is another opportunity. We'll see if they fumble it again. I would think on your phone, any number of functions, including a verification agent, right? Hey, Paul, here's what your phone thinks about that content, right? They've got enough distribution. The models are small enough now. Why wouldn't you have some kind of verification agent sitting on the phone owned by Verizon or, T-Mobile or whatever? Because people talk about running out of data. Those people have tons of data, right? And they've seeded the content stack and the interaction stack to the big guys. That's just nuts. I mean, if I were a telco, it'd be like, are we going to fumble it one more time?
Well, and I think that's a great play for Apple, John. They've got the trust brand on the privacy side, so it's a extension for them.
And there are questions remaining, like this one, right? Is if the content is mixed, how do you label it? And
great question.
So it's a question, but we need something, and hopefully Apple will step in. I agree.
All right.
So important.
I'm kind of sick of Apple. I'd like T-Mobile. It'd be nice, or maybe Verizon could wake from its slumber. Anyway, all right. Or one of the banks for that matter. Okay, next, Akash, we're doing this.
John, one of our audience members, Ashish, is disagreeing with your belief in innovation.
I was the one that said they haven't invented anything since Alexander Graham Bell. Come on. Yeah. All right. This is called torture. Go ahead.
So this is a longer article talking about how to build the future of AI in United States, and it specifically focuses on compute.
Yes, well, as part of our hazing process here for guest raters, we asked Vivek to look at this 50-page document. Vivek, what do you think?
Yeah, long story short, I was debating between important and optional, and I landed on optional. I think this is an extremely thorough researched article by this sort of research firm that instructs on policy. And this is, and don't get me wrong, this is an extremely important topic in the context of the next 10 years of generative AI within the United States. It does highlight the need, where the delta is right now between what the compute needs are going to be in the next 5 to 7 years versus where we are in terms of the energy that can support. And it makes the call for developing behind the meter type solutions, right? So we've already seen the last month or so, all the hyperscalers investing into energy. So everyone understands that this is an extremely important topic in the context of generative AI, but for an AI leader, it's not going to impact them in the short term. They need to consider when the building things at scale. But for the small use cases that the AI leaders are involved in right now, it may not be that important. So I'll save them the long read over the weekend.
So we usually put that in important. If it's a long read over the weekend and you don't have to read it. So optional or important?
I give it an optional, but I was between optional and important, given how well thorough researched this article is. So there's a lot of great insights and data to glean from it.
Yes.
Yeah, I support optional. It's really, but it is great data. It's a very well done report, but it's for an AI leader. It's really it's just awareness, but this data is not really necessary. So optional for me.
I was leaning toward important because I would think any AI leader that's certainly deploying is going to hear a lot. I mean, somewhere in some executive meeting, somebody's going to say, hey, look, what's the power cost going to be and all this other stuff. The other thing I thought was interesting is that these folks really don't deal with, I think, the trends around small models, mobile, and algorithmic improvement, right? Because if any of these, like the liquid AI algorithms, Vivek, we're looking at the product stuff, and/or mobile really takes off, and the quantized small models, these power assumptions are just going to be completely incorrect.
Yeah.
So if I was downgrading it for a different reason, which is not that I would make it essential if they'd include that, I would make it essential personally. Paul,
I can support important. I think they also talk a lot about security and to be competitive as a country. we need to invest in this. So I think there's a great section on security here as well as competitive, being competitive in the broader world.
All right, we're headed toward important. What do you think, Paul?
Sure, yeah. I mean, the only thing I'll throw in, I think hopefully the AI leader will at least skim this. It should reinforce the explosive token consumption we're seeing going to come up in the next 2 or 3 years in every single company, and people are wildly underestimating that from our conversations.
Yes, man. And
but remember that this is all assumptions, and there's a lot of work to optimize runtime, and lots of work. So these assumptions are unlikely to hold water. I really do think so. But I agree that at least to skim and realize it's all based on sand. It's assumptions, good assumptions, but.
Yes. Yeah, I would not want to be in the nuclear power generation business right now. Some of the core things are going to be kind of funky. Anyway, all right, we're going to pick up the pace here. I'm doing a bad job of managing time. Next.
Oh, we have more. Okay.
One more.
Last one. Yeah.
Yes.
So the last one that we have talks about 6 principles for thinking about AI risk.
Yes, so this is a book report on the AI snake oil book by the 2 Princeton folks who, it's kind of a clickbait title because they really don't talk about it as snake oil. It basically they're making the argument against generative AI. So just out of spite, I was going to give it an optional because I hate their title, but I'm gonna give it an important, maybe even essential. I think it's a well-reasoned argument as to why AGI is a red herring, and I agree with that. There's and they go through a bunch of reasons, why it's not about consciousness, why the technology is going to need to to have human intervention to take it to the next level. In addition, they do it it seems like, I haven't read the book, but in this report, they seem to do it in a balanced way. They say, oh, yes, but it has value for these reasons and so forth. So I was going to give it an important, kind of down the middle. They staked out, a lovely, clickbait title. So important. That's where I had this. What do you guys think?
I can support that, John. I think there's a good set of talk tracks and examples they provide for any AI leader who has to face naysayers. So, and this is a lot of those. So I can support important. I could use. I'm definitely using some of these examples.
So I didn't realize we're finishing up 2 minutes. I'm going deep optional. I think AI leader needs a focus on value in the next 18 months. And this whole debate, is AI going to kill us all? Where are all jobs going? Every minute the AI leader spends on that, he or she is adding career risk to themselves, to their team, and not adding a value here. So I don't want our AI leaders even talking about AGI.
Linda, where are you on that?
Yeah, I'm also on that. This is like in some sense esoteric discussion. And they're putting together 6 or 7 principles on how to think about it. It's esoteric for me. They need to focus on value. I agree with Paul. I'm in Paul's camp.
Yeah, I hear you, Paul. At the same time, I don't think any AI leader you can't fire the knuckleheads, right? There's always going to be naysayers. And so how can you deal with them efficiently? And I think this isn't bad. This isn't bad intellectual body armor against the stupid. If you want to put it that way, and I agree. With, I think it was Kevin Rashish. This is better than Gary Marcus. Gary Marcus doesn't do the middle. He, as I say, he does the Fox News thing. Did you see what the liberals did? Every liberal's like this. It's like, come on, buddy. This I think is more balanced. Anyway, all right, I'm going to give it important. Sorry about that, Paul. All right, Ankaj, what's the top board here?
Yes, John, coming right up.
All right, any announcements or anything before we go? Sorry, we're running over.
Yes, on Monday's Learning Lab, we're going to continue the group review of the state of AI. Nathan Benioff's report. We had a really good discussion last week, and we're going to finish that. Second is our teams continue to do a lot of work on our upcoming buyer's guide. It's going to come out at the end of November. But one of the things that we're getting a lot of requests for, we're going to conclude it, and ties to these meetings are just a lot of curated basic tables. What's a list of the leading AI public and closed models? What are the cloud providers' models names? What are the leading small models out there? Which ones actually have premise versions here? So a lot of the basic requests that we're getting is just get us context, because it's changing so often. So
Yes.
news is from our side.
Yeah, earlier in the discussion, Michael had, we need to define open. I think there's a good discussion, a good table in that whole report that talks about the different dimensions of open and how we think about it. So, all right, here we are. Wow, we've got 5 importance here and 1 optional. All right. So a lot of weekend reading for those who want to make time for it. Remember, important is not essential. You don't have to, but if you have the time, we advise you take it and go ahead and take a look. All right, everybody. Have a great weekend. Talk to you all Monday. Bye.
Vivek, it was wonderful having you here.
Oh,
Thanks
yeah.
for joining.
Yeah, thanks. Vivian.
Lovely to have you here.
Thanks for
If you come back, we promise not to give you the eternally long article.
joining.
Happy to.